Module 53 on page 526.
What happened to the...
Did you do the attendance yet?
Yeah, you did.
Uploaded 3 hours ago.
All right, module 53, 526. It's titled Sexual Development. We've been dealing with adolescence, and so this is another phase of adolescence. Reggie, you with me?
Yes.
Is there a phone out?
Sit down.
No, not.
Can we get rid of, oh, for that? Okay.
Not any more than normal.
All right, so listen up. This is a relatively lengthy module that I'm going to abbreviate for us so that we can do more CFUs today because we have a test tomorrow and we have a test with FRQs on it. So there'll be writing on tomorrow's test. All right, and I have gone fairly quickly on developmental.
50, right?
53.
53.
53. 526. Okay? But I think we've covered it pretty well. We've covered Kohlberg with his conventional, pre-conventional, post. We've covered Piaget pretty well with his sensor and motor, and then operational is in all 3 of them. The first operational is pre-operational, then you got concrete operational, then formal operational, right? We've got Erickson with his 8 stages, not going to do them now. We got Vygotsky with his socio-cultural theory and the zone of proximal development. We've had a whole host of studies like Mary Ainsworth and the Strange Situation. We've had Harry Harlow and the attachment with the monkeys. Just massive numbers of stuff in developmental. And the last 2 modules deal with sexual development, which is mainly for adolescents. And then the last module is like the aging, the final frontier. So, how do men and women differ? The main way that men and women differ is in their mating-related domains. So, the way they seek the opposite gender, who they want to be with, that's where men and women differ. At 7 weeks inside your mom, there is no difference between a boy and a girl. There's no sexual development whatsoever. Right? But at 7 weeks in there, something kicks on. And when it kicks on, testosterone starts to fly, or it doesn't. And if it starts to fly, that means you got 46 chromosomes. 45 of them really don't have anything to do with determining your gender, and the 46th one does. Right? Your mom is giving you an X chromosome for your sexual. Right? If your dad gives you an X as well, you're a girl. If your dad gives you a Y, you become a boy. Right? So if your dad gives you the Y at 7 weeks, inside your mom, the hormones, everything start kicking in, and it starts developing male sexual characteristics. If not, female sexual characteristics. Any question? They used to blame the women for not having a boy and all of that. It had nothing to do with the woman. All the woman has is the X chromosome. You get another one of those, it's a girl. You get another a Y, it's a boy. All right. Go down to the bottom of 526, prenatal sexual development. And one more comment on the females have testosterone too, just not as much of it. And males have estrogen too, which is the female equivalent of testosterone. But males generally don't have very much of it. So we both have the same as the other, but just differing amounts. Go to the top of 527. Puberty. When does puberty start in this country? For girls, it's around the age of 11 now, and for boys, because boys mature a little slower in many ways. No offense, but I'm one of them too. About 13. So 11 and 13. At the age of puberty, both primary and secondary sexual characteristics start developing. All right? Now, the biggest difference between primary and secondary sexual characteristics is primary sexual characteristics are directly related to you being able to reproduce. Secondary sexual characteristics don't. You could reproduce without those. They still happen, but you could reproduce without those. All right, so let's talk about primary sexual characteristics for girls are the reproductive organs. The ovaries for boys would be testicles or testes. Secondary sexual characteristics are your non-reproductive characteristics. So for girls, breast, underarm hair, hips start getting a little wider for girls. What are the hips getting wider for?
Holding a child.
So it's setting itself up for delivering. For boys, facial hair will start.
He's doing everything with his hands, and he raises them up, and it's making
Deepened voice, squeaky voices of childhood start turning into a little bit squeaky, but then turn into masculine. What's up?
I just realized, I'll edit this out, but I just realized that if someone looks at this who isn't in this class and doesn't know that you have cancer, you just happen to be waving around your rubber gloved hands while talking about hormones, and it was cracking me up.
Yeah.
Killing me.
Both genders will end up with pubic hair. Both genders will end up with underarm hair. Now most of these characteristics are starting earlier because there's an increased fat. The heavier a person is, the more likely it will start an onset of puberty, especially for females. And as a country, we're becoming fatter. And as we become fatter, it's shortening childhood and bringing an onset of puberty earlier. You know what menarche is? First period. You know the equivalent of that for boys?
No.
Sperm arc, right, which is the first ejaculation. So, for boys, generally this will occur somewhere around the age of 14 plus or minus a year. For girls, it's usually around 12, 12 and a half plus or minus a year. All right. Any questions on any of that?
No.
Next page. 528. If you look at the chart of the naked woman and the naked man, we're going to take a real quick look at the different primary or secondary. You tell me, is the underarm hair growth, is that a primary or secondary?
Secondary.
Why?
Because you don't need it to reproduce.
Don't need it to reproduce. Breast development.
Secondary.
Secondary, not needed for reproduction. Why are breasts developing though at this time? For milk for the baby.
Oh, I'm
That's
about to
the
say.
whole purpose of it. All right. How about the enlargement of the uterus?
It's primary?
Need a
Secondary.
uterus to have a baby?
Yes.
Do you need a uterus to have a
Well,
baby?
yeah.
Yes. So that's not a secondary. That's a primary. How about the adrenal glands? Secondary. Don't have to have them, but I mean they got to produce their stuff. But beginning of menstruation, primary. Pubic hair growth,
Secondary.
ovaries.
Primary.
All right. So for men, facial underarm hair growth,
Secondary.
secondary. Larynx, like Adam's apple,
Secondary.
secondary. Pubic hair,
Secondary.
Wouldn't that be primary?
Adam's
pubic
apple?
hair.
No. Your
She's
Adam's apple.
You don't need this to
I thought y'all
reproduce.
needed
Do
that.
you need this to reproduce?
No.
Okay. How about the growth of? How about the growth of testes or testicles? That's primary, because that's where the sperm is going to be developed. And the beginning of ejaculation, that's it. That's going to happen. Any questions on that?
That just makes a
Look at all this red.
I did not know that.
You did not?
No.
Right?
I always
That
thought
was- makes
men
her
needed
brain
Adam's apple to survive.
No.
I
Soon as you
like
take it
it.
out.
How did you think you survived without one? Then?
Because I'm a girl.
Like we have a dorsal fin.
Yes, like,
I don't think it's
I'm
important.
not a girl with it, so.
It's one of the things that deepens our voice. That's it.
Yeah, I don't think it's important, but anyway, hey,
I
you
will
want,
tell you an interesting fact. If you punch someone,
want to finish this earlier? Let's
Yeah,
keep
come
it
on.
rolling.
You punch someone, Adam.
Go to the top of 529 to STDs, but they're not called STDs anymore. They're now called STIs.
What's that?
That's the same thing.
Sexually transmitted what?
Infection.
They changed it from disease to infection?
Yeah.
Why?
That's okay.
Why are you so upset about it?
Now,
Right,
It make
you're
it
upset about this.
It make it seem less harmful when you say infection.
No, infection, that sounds terrible.
No, disease sounds terrible.
disease sounds worse, but anyway,
Let me put it this way.
we're getting
You can't
sidetracked on
contract
something.
dementia from that. That would be a disease.
Oh.
So let's get back on to STDs or STIs.
STIs.
Right. STIs in the United States are rising and have been for a number of years. 2/3 of the population under the age of 25 in this country potentially have an STI.
Say that again.
2/3. So you might want to be careful if you are experimenting that you make sure you with the right
That man
person.
said you're experimenting.
Okay. Ages of 14 to 19. Ages of 14 to 19. 39% of females have an STI.
That is disgusting. How many?
39% from the age of 14 to 19.
Oh, wait, what is it for
Okay.
girls?
Probably freaking 50 something.
If it's over, I'm laughing.
Condoms. Condoms provide limited protection against certain STIs. Like herpes and things like that, it'll provide some protection. However, you need to know that herpes isn't necessarily just transmitted through genitals. Herpes can go in other parts of a body. It's very infectious. So, they did a study of sex workers in Thailand, where they promoted condom use, like hookers in Thailand, and they promoted condom use, and the STIs went dramatically lower in them. So just the use of condoms alone was enough to at least lower the percentages. But remember, you're only one person, and only takes one person one time, and you've got one. So, and sometimes you've got it for a lifetime, and sometimes it can be treated, and it's gone. Condoms are 80% effective against HIV. That sounds great.
No.
Yeah, I don't like that
80%
20.
doesn't sound great against HIV.
That's what I was thinking too. I was hoping you guys would say that. 80% means, let's say you have intercourse with someone 5 times that had it. 80% means the likelihood is one of those 5 times you might have picked it up. So 80% might sound good to some of you, but it doesn't to me, and 80% is not. Like 99% sounds okay. Even that, I don't like the odds of that 1% being out
Yeah,
there.
can come to you. Like,
Right. By the way, men and women have intercourse, and which one of, let's say either gender has HIV, which one would be more likely to give it to the other if only one of them had it?
who would be most likely to give it to him?
If a man had HIV and he had unprotected sex with a woman, is he more likely to give it to her? Or if the woman had HIV and she had unprotected sex with a man?
I feel like it's a
No, woman more likely to give it to a man.
No, it's
No.
man to woman.
No.
Man and woman?
Man to
And the
woman.
reason why it's a man to woman is because inside the woman's uterus would be the sperm and all of the other stuff with the HIV in it, and it would stay in there longer. With the man, the only way it's getting in is through the tip of the penis, and that's not as open as much, and once you're done, you're done. So women, you need to be more careful on this. Go down to the picture of a HIV infected cell.
That looks disgusting.
Oh!
I saw that last
Yeah.
night. Ugh.
And I'll just leave it at that. But by the way, oral sex is not a safe sex option. Oral sex, you can pick up HIV or any of those other things the same way as the other way. Go to, I take questions, but we got to stop the side talk. Go to the bottom where it says teen pregnancy.
Teen pregnancy.
In the United States before the year 1900, so about 100 years ago, only 3% of people had intercourse before they were married. All right. Now it is 50%. Okay, so we went from 3% to 50%. The statistics in Europe are about the same. The statistics in Latin America are about the same. The statistics in the Arab nations and the Asian nations are lower. So probably more family interaction. Moms and dads are probably much more aware of what's going on there, and that's why it's keeping the numbers lower. When they've done twin research, the environment determines about 75% of whether you're going to be sexually active not your genes. It's not your genes determining your sexual activity, it's your environment. Your friends, your family, your acquaintances, boyfriend, girlfriend, stuff like that. 75% of your sexual activity is coming from the environment. Make sense?
Yes.
All right, next page. 530. The United States is much higher than Europe on teens with STIs. The United States is much higher on Europe with teen pregnancy. Interestingly enough, the United States and Europe, same amount of sexual activity for teens. So why are we higher on STI than teen pregnancy?
I don't know.
Not protected. They're protected. And by the way, in Europe, it's a lot easier to get condoms pretty much anywhere, especially for younger ages, because they figure that they're going to do it anyway. They would rather have them protected. Where here, we've always been much more moral. All right, don't do it. Abstinence only and all of that. And then when people do it anyway, they're not protected, and that's why our numbers are high. And I'm not advocating for one or the other. I'm just giving you the statistics on this. All right. What are some of the reasons why in America we have higher numbers than Europe, besides what I just said? One reason is parents don't discuss birth control with their teens as much as they do in Europe because they're uncomfortable doing so or whatever. A second thing is guilt about having sex. 72% of 12 to 17-year-olds who were sexually active, girls, felt bad about it. So if 72% of sexually active girls felt bad about it, that begs the question, why are they doing it? Right? If you feel bad about something, why would you do it? But yet it's still peer pressure, social, whatever. Alcohol. Get a hold of alcohol, it makes your inhibitions go down, and you may end up doing something sexually that you weren't planning on doing. It also depresses the frontal lobe brain centers that control to think, what are the long-term consequences of my action? So number one, we've got parents aren't discussing. Number two, guilty feelings about it, but yet they're still going through it. Number three, alcohol abuse. Number four, the mass media in this country is just atrocious. You watch a TV show, a primetime TV show, and sexual content is just throughout. When I was a kid, I would get in trouble for watching a show called, anybody ever heard of a show called Three's Company?
Yeah.
No,
Okay.
I ain't even that.
Okay, and let me just give you the premise of it. There's these two attractive girls living together, and they need money. Then they don't make enough money, so they need another roommate. They can't find another girl, and the landlord won't rent to a guy because he doesn't want all this sin happening. But the guy who decides to rent pretends he's gay, so they all pretend they're gay because if there's a gay guy with two girls, nothing's going to be happening. Right? He's not really gay, so it sets up all types of innuendos, and he's always trying to hit on the girls, and they like him, but not that way. And the landlord is always snooping to see if anything's going on.
I missed on.
Long story short, nothing ever bad happens, but there's like comments, and that was as bad as it gets in the 70s. That was a bad show in the 70s. Now, oh my goodness, I mean,
I ain't
There
gonna
was
lie.
also
just-
MASH in the 70s, and that had plenty of innuendos in it.
yeah.
But back in the day, TV seemed more interesting though. Cause that show.
You watch a primetime show now, and just if it's like an hour-long show or a half-hour show, just count. Just make a notch every time you hear a sexual innuendo or something sexual. I'll bet there's 10 or 20 in almost every show in a half hour or an hour. And some of them, it's just constant, one after the next. Anyways, because the mass media is making it bad, I mean, it's not a big thing. It's making it so that your age and under, if it's okay with these adults on TV, and we model these adults on TV, that's okay for us. And they said an average 1 hour primetime show, there's 15 sexual acts or innuendos or etc., or partners that are unmarried together, or you see them laying in bed after, I mean, maybe you didn't see anything, but they're laying in bed so you know what happened. There's no concern for birth control on these shows. There's no concern that someone's going to get pregnant on these shows. It's just, they have it, they're having fun, they move on with their life. And that's just not reality. But it is reality on TV, and it makes us think that way. Sexual content viewed is more likely, people that are viewing sexual contact are more likely to perceive that your peers are doing the same thing. And when people perceive that their peers are doing the same thing, then that makes it more acceptable for them to do it as well. Any questions on that? All right, that all makes sense? And two last things. One is when we push abstinence-only program. You know what an abstinence-only program is? It's a program you don't have sex. Or you just don't. You just say no. Right? And unfortunately, oftentimes abstinence-only programs don't work for the simple reason that if someone does get in the situation, maybe they were drinking, maybe they were peer pressure, maybe whatever. If they don't say no, then they're not prepared with some kind of contraceptive to keep them from getting pregnant or STI or something like that. They did a study, all right? And they did an abstinence-only program, and they put half the people that were in it, and they put half the people in that was the experimental program. And the other side was the control group. Same type of people, but they got nothing. And 49% of the people in the abstinence-only program abstained from sex. So that's not bad, right? Until you see the control group, and 49% of the control group abstained from sex too.
Oh,
So what does that tell you about the abstinence-only program?
it does, yeah. It's the
At least
same-
in that study, it didn't do anything. Right? There was no difference between having somebody in the abstinence-only program or no program at all. And so if that's the best you can do, you're wasting your time and your money. And one last thing, have I ever talked to you about a longitudinal study?
No.
I know what it is though.
A longitudinal study is a study when you watch a group for a long time. So if I were doing a longitudinal study on you, I would bring you back 5 years from now and test you on the same thing, 10 years from now, 30 years from now, 50 years if I could. Right? They did a longitudinal study on what are some things that are predictors for people to abstain from sex outside of a committed relationship. Right? Intelligence is one. The more intelligent a person is, the more they avoid those situations. Another one, the more involved with religion they are, the more likely they're to stay out of that. If the dad is present in their life as they're growing up, they're more likely to stay out of that. And I've already talked about this one, and this is why I'm big on this one. If they're involved in service learning programs at school. What's a service learning program? Community service. How in the world does that help you abstain from sex?
Because you're doing.
You're busy.
You're doing
something
community
else.
work. Or you could be busy. You could be doing community work. You're doing good things. And sexual relations without some type of relationship is like, most people perceive that as not necessarily a good thing.
It's not.
And so that goes against your service learning. Any questions?
No.
All right, go to the top of the next page. You read this on your own, but the sexualization of girls. Sexualization occurs when girls are led to, I'm just reading the 3 bullets and I'm moving on. They're led to value themselves in terms of their sexual appeal. The brain doesn't matter, the friendships don't matter, it's just whether they're hot or not.
Hot.
Okay? When they compare themselves to narrowly defined beauty standards. This is another reason why we have a large number of anorexic women in this country, and a large number of bulimic women in this country, and a large number of eating disorder women in this country, is because the models in this country that we've said are the hot ones, have waist like this, and butts only slightly bigger, and supposedly their boobs are giant, but they're little tiny waists. I mean, that's not normal. That is not the way people look. And so when young girls grow up and they say, hey, that's what everybody likes, that's what I want to look like, and the only way they can do it is to cheat their body out of the nutrients that it needs, yeah, we end up with a lot of eating disorders. And we have them, where the other countries in the world don't as much. Right? And the third one is they see themselves as sexual beings for the use of others. Moving to the bottom of 531, sexual orientation. All sexual orientation is talking about is who would you prefer to be with? All right? So if you're a male and you're hetero, you want to be with a female. If you're a male and you're homo, you want to be with a male. If you're a female, same thing, vice versa. All right? Now, there's also an orientation of bisexual, which means they
Like
Like
both.
both.
prefer both. And then there's asexual, in which
You don't like it?
they don't want it with
That's a
anyone.
thing?
Okay? Yeah. Not very many. 1% of the people or less are asexual. Any questions on any of the sexual orientations? All right, go to the next page, 532. Now, what caused me to like women, or what caused another guy to like men, or a woman to like what causes this?
I think it's environment.
Jeans.
I don't think it's
No, it's not
environment.
genes. It's environment. He just said
I just
environment.
think you know. I don't know.
Look,
I don't
you-
think
you
it's
just grow
environment.
up-
It's an environment. I
I
think
think there wasn't
Here.
yeah, it's not genes. It's environment. I think
Dude,
it's
it's
genes.
gay people walking down the street with us.
It's not the environment.
It's not.
Not the environment.
What
It's
is
the
it?
genes.
It's
And I got some proof for you. So here we go. Listen up. Go near the bottom. Let's read the thing for the bridge first. Go up a little bit on the bridge, because this is pretty sad. Driven to suicide in 2010, Rutgers student Tyler Clemente jumped off this bridge after he had an intimate encounter with another man, and it became known. The reports then surfaced of other gay teens who had reacted in a similarly tragic fashion after being taunted. He killed himself after one experience with a guy. People found out about it, and he was horrified that it would get out, and so to get away from it, he jumped off the bridge and killed himself. What percent of people are exclusively homosexual? They think that around 3% of men only prefer other men, no women. They think around 1 to up to 2% of women exclusively prefer women. Now, how does it feel to prefer someone that the rest of society looks funny at? Okay? How does that feel? Imagine if it were reversed and you were among the 3% of men that liked women, and everyone else is like, look at that dude likes a girl. Look at him. I mean, he's with a woman. Imagine that, and imagine 97% of the population point and say, look at that's a guy and a girl together. Okay? I mean, it's odd to think about it that way.
No, but you would feel some type of
How
way,
would
like-
how would you like to feel that different than everyone else?
Can't imagine
That's
it being a very
the-
big population.
That's how they feel.
That's what I was just about to say.
That's how they feel.
Yeah, I can't imagine that being a
Okay.
huge population.
That's why people
There'd be some problems.
Oh, yeah.
Get this. Until 1973, the APA classified homosexuality as a mental disorder. So it's only 45 years ago that homosexuality was actually considered something that to be cured.
Oh.
Just put them in and let's see if we can fix them. Right?
Oh,
Yeah.
Did they use shock therapy on some people?
They did. They
Oh,
used
wow.
shock
Two
therapy.
things. First off, they still have gay conversion camps. They do that, some of them. But they've only, I think it was 2015 that they took being transgender off that list too.
Yeah,
So
so
that's
it's
no
not,
longer
I mean,
mental
we're
disorder either.
relatively new in the process of these sexual, and I'm not gonna argue biblically or anything like this with you, but if a person is homosexual, and let's say it is genetic, which we think it is, well, how can we blame them for that? I mean, how could you look down at them for that? And how could you consider that a disease, which was considered that not that long ago? Anyway, by the way, if you are homosexual, depression rates are through the roof. Suicide rates are much higher than normal. And these are things that, as human beings, I would think we would want people to not feel that way. I mean, unless they're hurting us in some way. That's just me. I want to read you 4 questions, and you guys tell me what you think the answers are. Is homosexuality linked with problems in a child's relationship with their parents? Like if they have a real dominant mother or a submissive father? No.
It's not?
No. Nothing to do with that.
It's genes.
Right? Does homosexuality involve a fear or hatred of people of the other sex? So a guy is afraid of women, and so that's what turns him to men.
No.
No. All right. Is sexual orientation linked with levels of sex hormones that are in your blood, like the estrogen or?
No.
Actually, no, not that either. Because the level of sexual hormones that you have are based on your gender, not your orientation. So if you're male, whether you're homosexual or heterosexual, you're still gonna have a certain amount of testosterone. That's not gonna change,
Oh, okay.
right?
Yeah.
You're just gonna give the testosterone to a different gender, one or the other, right? And as children, were most homosexuals molested or seduced or otherwise abused?
No.
No.
No. Okay. In other words, all those questions deals with like outside things. What we know about homosexuality is it's genetic, and we're going to get to that right now.